So it's 30 minutes. I want to break this up into three different areas. So the first part is we're going to look at our strategy and how we evolved it. Then we're going to look at delivery and how we can enable this to happen. And then I want to look at what is digital transformation to me. Walking around in this conference, I've seen a lot of people say they hate digital transformation. I think there's some confusion on what it is. So hopefully we can refine that idea a little bit more. A little bit about me. I work for the Federal Transit Administration. I work in outside of that, a lot of public and private partnerships. The Federal Emerging Citizen Technology Group, if you're a Fed, that's a really good group to join. So I'd highly recommend that. We talk a lot about what other agencies are doing with RPA, machine learning, augmented reality, and robotic process automation. So like the State Department right now is about to launch a blockchain in partnership with Coca-Cola. So they were going over the use case with us and explaining us how that looks. For the last 10 years, I've been working with Appian systems in the federal space. So I've worked on 16 of them. 6 of them were really large mission systems. And it was for around like a total user base of 60,000 users. So this has been an evolution of looking at how you build single systems and now consolidating them to put them all together. So this strategy has evolved over time. And we're also working on putting together a Washington, D.C. meetup group that's going to meet on a quarterly basis. So I hope the people that are in the D.C. area will come out and visit that. And we want to make that a little more customer-facing, and the goal of that is going to be to understand how to do things. So I want to talk more about like going from 0 to 20% and what you need to get there. When we look at FTA, let's start with the Department of Transportation. And so the Department of Transportation, FTA is a sub-agency to it. And I think right now with the Department of Transportation, our job is to provide safe, efficient transportation services to the American people now and in the future. And we're seeing a lot of disruption in that space right now. So you can look at like Uber, and that's changing the way that people route themselves in cities. There's been a lot of talk about autonomous cars. So the department as a whole is dealing with a lot of emerging technologies being forces into a way that we are going to have to operate. When you look at our sub-agencies, in general, they're divided up. We call them modes inside. So Federal Aviation Administration deals a lot with airplanes and flight type stuff. You have FRA, which is the railway group. They are like Amtrak. But when you look at us, we kind of cover everything with what we're doing. So there's trolleys, there's ferries, there are buses. For us, what we're doing is we're providing local public transit. And we're doing that by providing financial and technical assistance. So we break that up into 2 areas, capital investments and then safety. And on the capital investment side, that's where our grant programs are. So we're going to fund you to build a subway system, and then we're going to make sure that you can deliver on that and what are the areas of support you have. By taking federal money, are you complying with certain laws, like you have to buy America or you have to get a waiver if you can't do that? Then in 2012, we had the FAST Act, which introduced this safety piece to us, so we started to become more regulatory. And so now we're thinking about public transportation and how can we make it more safe. So those are the 2 big areas of our mission. When we look at the top level of our organization, we have on the one side regions, and then on the other side headquarters. So like with most government agencies, our regions are the ones that are dealing with our customer. As what Francois was saying, those are the local agencies, so they could be like a state, an Indian tribe, or a municipality. And they're really assisting with the grant side of things for the most part right now. So they're dealing with how you can submit grants and what types of assistance do you need when we're doing our oversight activities. And we provide a lot of training, and we try and enable our grantees. I think that's a very important thing. And that side is more of the customer-facing side, is the way I look at it. And then when you look at the headquarters, there are pieces of it that are dealing with the whole country. So like civil rights, the Transit Safety Office, those are groups where they're looking at are we making sure that people with disabilities are being provided access on these things? The safety group is now thinking about, like, how do we make sure that these public transportation systems are safe? And we have some interesting things going on too, like research, demonstration, and innovation. So that's actually looking at Uber. We have something called the FTA Sandbox. We give away about $8 million to places like Uber to do research and see if we can take advantage of Uber to extend our transit system. So if you go on the last part of a transit system to the last station, you could take a 1 mile ride in an Uber potentially to your home, or you can use it to get to your home so that you don't fill up the parking lot there. So we're looking at some of those programs. And even and just recently, about a month ago, there's one city in Arlington, Texas, that is now just using Via, which is a service kind of like Uber, for all of its transportation. It's decided to get rid of all its buses. So we are thinking about the future, and we're trying to understand how we route people around. So now let's take a little look at us from an information technology point of view. So when we started out back in 2011, and you looked at us, we had a lot of silos. So there was a grants management system, there was a transit data collection system, there was a grants oversight system. And there was a couple others. But like the data between them, there was like times when you need pull data to leverage information. And so we wanted to streamline that a little bit more. So we knew that we had to modernize. So that was like developing a tactical need. And so we started thinking of ourselves, well, what else do we want? And so let's get out of the commodity IT business. That's one of the things my boss likes to say a lot. And he also wants to improve his security posture. We wanted to get cost savings from shared services. And we were thinking maybe we can improve our customer experience and follow a more modern methodology with Agile delivery. So the vision we created was this vision of platform as a service. We wanted something FedRamped so that it complied with government cloud standards. We actually sponsored Appian for its FedRAMP. And then the other idea was, with these shared services, we needed to create components and build building blocks. And these building blocks would create the results of these applications. So when we brought Appian into FTA, one of the very first things we did was we started walking around all our business lines with Legos, started trying to explain to them what this would look like and how you could have these general processes, and we'd be able to build things faster and provide better value for them more quickly. And so when you look at what we did, we start by going back to 2011. We did a study from an EA perspective of like, what should the future of FTA look like? And then in 2012, we focused more on starting to do action on that. The EA study was done by one group, and then development of the grants management system was done by another. The grants management system is called TRAMS. It manages around $68 billion for a portfolio, so it's a large system. And last time I looked, I think it had like between 5,000 and 6,000 configuration items in it. And it's being supported by a team of 30 people. So there's complexity with it. And then we also started our transit data collection system, which is called our National Transit Database. That's a pretty cool thing. A lot of researchers use it because it tells you about the types of movement that people are doing in cities, how many buses exist in particular cities. And there's a lot of time spent trying to make sure that there's quality data in there. So those two systems were being built out. Those were the first two that were going to go on our Appian platform. Everything from the initial vision was targeted to go to the same exact production box. There's one production box, and these are all going to exist on it. When we started executing on this, though, these teams were siloed off from each other. They weren't talking enough to each other. And then what we realized, it was actually FTA that came up with this, was that the user management needed to be a shared service, and it wasn't being built. Each of these guys was building their own system for user management, and then if you deactivated somebody on the grant side, then it would deactivate them on the transit data collection side, and that wasn't a good thing. So we needed to build out a shared service. So we had Appian come in there, and they took parts of those things and merge them together to create our user management system. But then what happened is, we didn't build it to scale. So then we had to rewrite it again. We had to think about it, and now, we were going to build 3 more systems, and there's just like this weird star thing going on because of the way the design was. So we had to rewrite this again, and we had to rewrite this to be scalable. So this is something where, a strategy should have been thought about for the whole portfolio and how this feeds into it. And that was missed, and so that created some challenges. And then, since the EA study was done and nobody from the EA study stayed around to make sure we followed through on it, I think some of the context or the design decisions of why the recommendations of the EA study were what they were get lost. And so what we thought about doing is from now on, when we do studies of our business line, we want to make sure that some of those people stay throughout the life cycle of the process or the project, so that there's context the whole entire way throughout. So we started doing more strategic approaches to our studies, and we're doing one on the Transit Safety Office and our grant oversight team to just understand end to end what are they trying to do as a business line, and then identify opportunities where we can put technology in place to benefit them. While all this stuff is going on, we also wanted to make sure that we put some governance framework around it. So we added this Appian Enterprise Governance Group. And the idea behind this group was not to create burden, but figure out ways to enable our Agile delivery teams. And so that can be a struggle at times. So we do talk about, are we burning too much time trying to govern, or how can we make this a more efficient process, which is something we'll look at a little later. And then the final piece of what has come out is that we're also realizing that we have to redesign some of our business processes as a result of the decisions that we decided to make strategically. So this data management group is actually looking at our organizations, our business lines, and how we identify organizations. So if you go to the grants management group, they will tell you that an organization is registered this way. If you go to the transit data collection group, they will say an organization is registered a different way. And so we want to have one way of looking at all our organizations that are our customers for FTA so that we can make better use of all this data and combine it more and get more interesting insights. And that's actually an initiative that's been backed by our CFO. So that kind of helps with the change by having some senior leadership interested in it. So taking all this stuff and combining it, this is how we view our enterprise. So we have this strategic level piece, and then we have different types of services being offered, and then we have these instances of modules. And what was important with this was a way to help the business line rationalize what they were getting. Because there was a lot of fear with having one giant platform that their needs were not going to be met, and they didn't have their own applications anymore. Because when they had their own server and they would log into it, that was all theirs. And now there's one place where everything is shared. And so we've identified 4 areas so far. When you look at grants management, reporting, and oversight, those 3 exist or are being built right now. And then this final area is the most recent area that we found as a result of some of our business studies that we've been doing. So we've realized that there's this guidance component that a lot of places could leverage or take advantage of. So that's going to be the next piece of our roadmap, potentially. We're keeping it on there as a placeholder right now. So now I want to dive a little bit into business architecture. I know this is a little bit messy of a diagram, so I'm not going to spend too much time drilling into it, but I want to get across a few key points with this. A lot of places I've noticed that they spend too much time trying to draw out and orchestrate processes. And so that's a very low level way of thinking about things. And so what we try and do is we try and do the opposite way. So we start with our business line, and we want to understand at a high level what are all the things that are going on and how they're interconnected. And when we did the first iteration of this drawing, the whole right side of it, I guess, was not there. We had to actually interview 100 people to create this picture. And in the process of interviewing those 100 people, we also started mapping out some of the processes. This was for our grants oversight system. And so to make this work, I think the first thing was we had to figure out a way to communicate with our business line and create a common language. So for them, they're not always process people. But they're lawyers and they're policymakers. So that's what we did, was we started with, all right, Congress has created a law and told you to do blank. What happens next? And then they said, oh, well, then we create our rules and we harden that law by explaining how we look at what we're going to do for that law. And we get, industry and our leadership to approve that. And then once that's approved, then we create, a national program oversight plan. And then from there, there's these 3 areas where you're doing planning of what you want to do oversight on. Then you're doing the reviews for oversight. And then you're issuing findings of things you want to be fixed. And you see, so we create this common language. And then what's also good is that by talking to all 100 of these people, we've created a consistent way that they speak about these things, because they all looked at these pictures, they all developed them with us. So the second we do identify, I'm going to make this area technology or that area technology, what happens is IT comes in and they're all saying the same things. There's no confusion about what means what, and it accelerates the development process. These studies that we do generally take about 3 months. So we're not investing a huge amount of time. We're trying to do some sort of waterfall process in the front and then do Agile. We just want to understand what the business is doing, and areas where we think it's complicated, drill into those and get a good understanding of that, so that when we start these projects, we feel more ready and we got everybody on the same page. So I think, goals, you want to identify what's being done across the portfolio. Developing this common language that I was talking about. Do not look at this from a technology point of view. This is just what the business is trying to do. When you start creating the solution, that's when you're going to start thinking about, are there opportunities to change the way this business line works? Are there any shared services? When we looked at a couple of these, we realized that one group is doing reviews and another group calls them audits. So now we're targeting that as a potential shared service. And it's 2 different teams, 2 different business lines at FTA. But that's just the strategy piece. So when we talk about delivery, we'll get into a little bit more about that. And this basically distills your solutions, as I said. So when we look at the design side and the lessons learned, the most important thing is that you don't want to just modernize what you have and pull away one thing and stick in another. You want to optimize, and you want to look at the whole entire portfolio across your organization and think about, what are some of the things that I need to change and how can I make things better as a whole, not just for one business line and one process. You got to develop some sort of business architecture prior to doing any deep dive business analysis. Get everybody on the same page, so that when you start building things, everybody's communicating the same way and has the same vocabulary. Don't be afraid to rethink the way you want to do your business when you bring in new technologies. That's supposed to be the exciting and fun part. And when you look at the private side of the world, we talk a lot about these greenfields, the startups that come from nothing. And then, they don't have any processes. So they're able to just recreate themselves in a way and do business differently. And we're also seeing that on the government side too. An interesting group to look at is Estonia and how much digital services they have. In India also, there's 99% of their population has a digital ID for their birth certificate, yet only 26% of their population has access to the internet. It's nuts to look at what some of these third world countries are doing right now. So we've just gone through the strategy piece of it. And now the next piece of it I want to look at is the delivery side of it. So let's start with release management. Like I said, we do Agile with our organization. So on this left side is just a Gantt chart, and it shows what we're doing on a week-by-week basis. The middle area is where all our UATs are occurring. The bottom is where we do our pre-production deployments, where we might do some performance testing, and we want to just validate our build package. And the top is production releases. So with 3 systems, we did about 90 releases last year. These are all going to the same production. You can see how there's 3 all occurring at the same time. And we've also kicked up 3 new projects that are going on. So this is growing, right? So when we look at that, let's think about the goals. So on this right side is showing how we actually deliver. code? How do we move it across? So we created like dev and test environments for each system. Then we merge it into a UAT. Then we're going to put it into this code repository. And then from there, the code repository can be pulled into pre-production, prod, or a training environment. All the environments on the right-hand side, the blue ones, are shared environments. So the reason why we chose this was when we looked at the goals, we wanted to make sure the modularization was happening. So if we didn't keep devs and tests separate, what we were going to end up with is just one huge, giant super code base. It would be hard to scale up and down the number of resources we have. Right now, I think we have around like 60, maybe 70 Appian developers, business analysts working on this platform. So in doing something like this, if you got a bunch of shared environments, I think it's important that you got to start now creating some ground rules. So we developed guidelines of how we do deployments, how you deliver these releases. To make sure that people were following them, we segregated the duties off of that so nobody who does the work in the lower environments can deploy to production or pre-prod. And they're validating that they actually followed our procedures. A source of truth for the code repository is really important for the shared services. So if I'm going to spin up another environment down below, I'm going to be able to need to pull that code out easily and put that there so that I can scale up what I'm doing. And then since UAT is shared, we should have a consistent customer experience. So we've been working on that. And the other big thing is making sure that all these teams are talking to each other. So if there's like 3 releases going on in one day, they should be like thinking a little bit further ahead and make sure that they're communicating about what's going on. Those types of activities. So you see how we do releases. Now I want to look a little bit at like how we're supporting Agile and still making sure that what we need is going on. So when you think about our production environment, one of the big risks with it is if we got like 5 or 6 business applications on it and a couple of them are mission critical. Well, if performance goes bad for one, it kind of goes bad for all the rest. So we want to make sure that people are building things properly. But we wanted to do that supporting Agile. And so with Appian, there's like 2 key areas to me. There's what's going on with the Appian code, and there's what's going on with the database, the business database. So this is an example with 3 sprints. On the top is how we look at our Appian code. So I work with all the development teams to create an extension of Appian's playbook where we have our own set of best practices that we follow in addition to Appian's playbook. So we follow their interface design rules, but it's like little nuances of like, how do you name something? Don't put views on top of views, things like that. So we have all these ground rules. And so whenever somebody completes a functionality piece, what happens is that those best practices are reviewed by a senior developer, and they make sure that that's being implemented. And then that code then moves to test. And it might not be every sprint, but like every other sprint, we're then running health checks, which is a plugin that's free from Appian. And we're seeing, what are the results of that? Like, is the code base actually good, or are there any potential problems? And we're issuing findings, which end up in like the backlog, and they need to be addressed before you go to production. And we're doing the same thing on the database side. We've actually introduced data governance. And the important thing with that is there's 2 pieces to it. At the front of the sprint, you want to understand, did somebody get their relationships right? And then at the back of the sprint, did they build the database in a correct format? So we created 2 guides for that. One is how do you model, and the other is how do you build these things? And this helps other people. This initiative I worked a lot with our chief data officer on so that we could figure out a good way to do that. And then once things are in production because they have no findings, what happens is we still then hire Appian Labs to run a service to tell us, do they see anything that could potentially be wrong? Because, during this whole thing, an example could be like, I didn't think about how large the data was that was going to be going through the feature. And so it might throttle it, or it might not work out as well. And so the Appian Labs things go in the backlog and then refeed through this all. So those are some of the things that we do to protect our delivery and make sure that we put together something of value. So we talked about strategy, we talked about delivery. They need to align with each other. So when I'm doing the strategy side of things, I'm promising something. And when I'm delivering, I'm hopefully creating what I promised. So we really go through this definition area where, it was about, we're just going through everything that we just talked about. So we went through the business architectures. we started, looking for shared services and opportunities for the organization to change. And then, we went into this area of solution. And so with solution, I think the important things that need to happen is that you got to understand what your high-level components are. So in the Agile world, that'd be epics, And then where are your design risks? So somebody's explaining to you what they want to build at a high level, and there's areas of it that might not work out well. So those are the areas that you're going to want to focus in on the delivery side. And then so when we move into delivery, what we do is we do those checkups. So they'll start doing their drill down and they'll start building things for us. And then what we do is we evaluate based on the design risks for those components, whether or not they're going well or do they look like they'll be manageable. And then that might also lead us to identify other areas of risk where we'll want to look at those. But those are checkups, and we don't want to be burdensome during the Agile process, and we want to see when things are more refined and ready to be looked at. So that's where architecture teams kind of intersect with the development teams. And then the other important thing is to validate that your shared services are actually correct. So like when I created this strategy and I said this is a shared service, when I'm really going to find out whether it is or not is when the data group looks at the data structures of these things. So if you don't have a data structure that can work with both things that you think are a shared service, then it's not worth building the shared service. If you view it from a process standpoint, what's going to end up happening in Appian is you're going to end up with all these weird lines that are just pointing all over the place. People try and make things that shouldn't be shared services a lot, I feel like, with Appian. So when we look at the delivery lessons learned, the most important thing to me is, you got to create a common understanding of ground rules. So what is good development? For both the database and Appian. And then, as you go through building things in your cycles, you're going to, like, from those findings, you're going to see patterns, and those are going to be additional ground rules you want to put in place. And in essence, you're building a knowledge base. As an organization, I have this Appian capability, and these are the things that make me feel more enabled and work better. You got to facilitate communication. Agile, the most dangerous thing with it is having all these streams and the people not talking to each other. We talked about the alignment of delivery. And, I think that data is really important too. So data governance, another side effect of that is I feel like now we're like avoiding garbage in, garbage out. We're making sure we have a higher quality of the data. And by having better understanding of the relationships, it helps our reporting and just makes our life easier. And this leads into digital transformation, actually. But let's look at our enterprise one final time. So, this is what we came up with. And so the benefits to us for this was that, we've got services that are aligning more with our mission. And instead of the business line coming to us with needs of systems too, we're starting to identify systems that don't exist that we think the organization needs. We have one consolidated platform, reducing infrastructure footprint, a more consistent user experience for platform applications. Shared services are in place. So like the user management thing, that's something that nobody worries about anymore. They just take the code and then they build their stuff on top of that. And we're growing our knowledge base of Appian. And we're an organization and we outsource a lot to development teams. But when a new development team comes in now, we'll be able to give them ground rules and say, this is what some of the things that you need to follow. So that makes us less integrator dependent. Jumping to digital transformation now. I think some of the stuff I was talking about is, you have this physical world and then you have this digital world. The digital world is data. And as a business or government, what I'm doing is I'm taking stuff that's in the physical world and moving it into the digital. So the transformation is thinking about how you need to change yourself because of that. So I think a lot of people end up with modernization strategies where they honestly pull out a block of what's physical and just try and replace it with something digital. They don't think about how they can gain more benefit from that. It's more about changing that what though. Like how do I operate? And so what needs to be shifted to make this better and work more? The IT shop can get away with modernization strategies. You don't have to do as much selling. But like when you're doing more of a transformation strategy, you're going to need your executives to help you sell it. There's no way to operate that without that. Because you're looking at the people, the policy, the process, the technology, the platform. I mean, so with modernization, you can look at it from a top level and then drill down into the details later. With transformation, you really need to look at the details and structure what those top levels are going to be, because you may want to reorganize some of the things. And then you end up with, in a transformative environment, a higher level of collaboration between IT and the business line. And so, at the top, we have like 6 different stages of maturity for digital transformation. So you could do business as usual, which probably this isn't the best conference for you. We could be present and active, where some of the business lines are starting to do experimentation. Formalized, that's where the experimentation is being intentional and you're building a knowledge base and learning from what's going on. Strategic is where people are starting to come together from different groups and talk about what's going on and figure out strategies of what's the best way to do this. I feel like that's the area where FTA is. We don't really have a dedicated digital transformation team. We have a governance team. And then the last one is where it's embedded in your DNA. So your executives should be, when they're doing their strategic planning, thinking about how the digital strategy affects it and what needs to change with their strategy on it. So then as far as takeaways, I mean, digital transformation, to me, the most important thing is about the data. Process and those other things are important too, but I think that most people miss that. Data is what we're doing, and I think for the last 20 years, all we've been doing is creating more and more data collection strategies. So let's make sure that we have good data quality. You got to be mature with your organization because you're going to be integrating IT and the business more together. You want to build your knowledge base. Strategy needs to align with the delivery. And Appian governance can work with Agile delivery methods. It's more about the enablement. It's not about creating burden and bureaucracy.